so let's talk about this. What does it take to really take trading to another level? And to me, what helped me out tremendously is basically trying to think like a market maker, right? And think of it like you had $3 trillion or whatever, and you were really trying to fool retail traders. How would you do it? Okay. We're going to start the week off just so we can show you essentially what I'm talking about and how I process all this. All right. So, the first thing is if you're trading Sunday, Monday, all right, the only thing that you have to go off of is a previous week. Obviously, the previous week is only going to tell you what type of cycle that previous week was. So, for example, if we look at this here, we have basically, essentially, we have a market maker cycle here, and then it goes into right into a trending cycle. Okay, let's take a look and see essentially what happens Sunday, Monday. And so if you're trading Sunday, Monday, I think it's very important for you to be aware that anything can happen Sunday, Monday, right? Pretty much. So you want to be prepared for pretty much anything. You're like an open book, essentially. And so as we play this out, understand essentially what's happening here when you look at the actual price action. All right, so as we go through this here, what are we seeing right now? We're seeing potentially, let's just say, a peak formation high here so far, and then goes down to level one, let's just say. And then we have the 50 here that's basically keeping price at the very top of the range or spiking. Do you see that? Do you see that spike that happens there? So that spike that happens there could be a clue, essentially, that we could be actually looking for potential sells, especially if you have the 200 that's right here, right there as well. So that could also hold price in place. So as we take a look, all right, so right here, do you see this? Look, do you see that M right there? And then do you also see, look at the TDI right here. You see how it's curving down? Let's play this out a little bit. There's your crossover. Okay, so this could be basically a type 2 setup. Now, ideally, what we would like to see is a pullback. So if we can get a pullback on the next candle, maybe half the candle right now, that way we can get, and then 30 pips is probably like right there. And so your risk reward ratio is under 13 pips, 2-to-1 risk reward ratio, if we can get a pullback on the next candle. All right, and that pullback, if it fits at least half of the bar where the crossover happened. So there's a pullback, and then let's see how this plays out. All right, so you take profit there, you're done. Okay, so there's your profit hit. Now, if we play this out, you can see it goes down way further, but we go into the U.S. session now. Okay, now the U.S. session, obviously, since we're done trading, honestly, if you get 30 pips, guys, during London, just leave it for the day. There's no reason to go back for the U.S. session. All right, there's just no reason for that at all. All right, so don't do it. Just get your money and get out. All right, so as we move on to the next day, all right, we basically prepare to see what happened on Sunday, Monday. So Sunday, Monday, we basically had a false move down. All right, false move in one direction. Now, depending on what we get on Tuesday, will help us determine what type of a cycle this is going to be in. Okay, and so let's see essentially how this Asian range plays out. So you can see that we have basically the 200 at top, the 50 on the bottom, right? So when you have this kind of behavior, okay, when you have both of them, it basically kind of squishes price or squeezes price in the middle, right? So typically you're going to end up getting possibly a type 3 setup here. Now the problem is that it may not be the setup that we want, though, because it comes out of the middle of the range. So you see how it comes out of the middle, and it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. It just spikes. You see that? You see how it's keeping it basically back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so ideally, this is not the type 3 setup that we want to trade, but this is literally like the only option that it's giving us. You can see how basically price right here is being squeezed by the yellow and then the outer band here. So as we play this out, you can see that price now starts to basically go away from the 50 and moving up. Now we go up to the top of the range here, you see, and then now we come back. So can we get, if we can get an actual like spike down here, or just even a little bit more to where we could touch the 50 possibly, we can get like a type 3 setup, because it may have started out in the middle, but it did go to the top of the range and then it came back down to the middle, okay, and then gets rejected. So let's see here. All right, so there's one right there. So what's the next candle? Okay, you see how it keeps squeezing it out more and more and more? All right, so there's the candle right there. So the question is, can we get another pullback, basically to get us into the trade? Because this candle is like 10 pips big, right? So ideally, I would like to have maybe an entry right here, maybe half of that candle, and then you could use like a 12 pip, 14 pip stop loss right below the middle of the range, and then essentially your target is going to be, the target would be either yesterday's high or the previous week's high. Okay, so let's see what happens. All right, so perfect. There's the pullback, and then that would have put us into the trade, that pullback there. And then let's see what happens. All right, so we get to the top of yesterday's high, which is great. Now, this tells us kind of a story that we want to see. All right, so essentially what this lets us know is that if we went up false move Sunday, Monday, and then we went on Tuesday, did a type 3 straight up, okay, we went basically past or to yesterday's high, and we're ranging on that yesterday's high now. Okay, so now this basically looks like a market maker cycle, because we had a full day of rise. We didn't have a pullback, on London or anything like that. We literally had a full day of rise. So it rose London and it rose New York. So if this is a market maker cycle, what's going to be very interesting to see is we have previous week's high here. So essentially there's, like I always talk about, a couple different scenarios that we can look for. We can look for price to basically tag previous week's high here and make like a type 1 setup. We can look for potentially a type 2 setup. It all depends, guys, on how the Asian session is. Okay, it all depends on this Asian session, because you can see we're not going to get like a multi-day M, because we're already past that high. Here's the thing: we got a 13 pip Asian range. Okay, ideally we would want a type 1 setup on this. Okay, but knowing if this is a market maker cycle, we're really looking for sells. Okay, and so in this situation, it's not going to give us a type 1 setup all the way up here, because look how price is behaving. Okay, it's all about how price is behaving in that situation. You may want to have a type 1 setup all the way up here, but if you see price in the Asian range is not giving you that, guys, it's not going to give it to you. Okay, so you have to take what it gives you, and you have to be able to adjust depending on what behavior you're getting essentially from this specific type of setup. This is more than likely going to be a type 3 setup. There's no question about it, because you have big bars, basically going back and forth, back and forth. You have the 50 here that's basically holding it until it breaks it. Okay, so it could either go straight sideways the entire day, or literally this is going to be the midweek reversal that we're waiting for, essentially, on a market maker cycle. Okay, so as we play this out, all right, we're looking for basically an entry, and ideally, after this candle's over with, this would be pretty good entry, because your stop loss would be super tight because of what it is here. You can even go all the way up to the top of the range here on a 7 pip, stop loss. But your risk reward is going to be huge, because you can take it to the this 200 EMA. And that's about 30 pips. Now on a risk reward ratio, look at that. That's like almost 5 to 1, right? So let's see what we get here. So there's your take profit. And then look, you even get, you see this? Look, you get a type 1 W into the US session. There's your crossover here. Here's your crossover. So can you get a pullback? And you could possibly take a very short trade, like very short trade, back up, possibly to the top of the range here, the top of this, the bottom of this range. Let's see. So from here, it's only about 9 to 10 pips. I personally don't think it's worth it. So I don't think it's something to pursue, to be honest with you. Yeah, so basically made it to them back to the middle. All right, so that wasn't a good. That wasn't the best setup. All right, so let's go into Thursday. So we go into Thursday, and essentially we're looking for what? We're looking for sells on Thursday, right? So let's see how this range works. Tammy, so you see how this range went all the way down 68 pips. Okay, so you have to think about this, guys. All right, think about how this is basically coming out as right now. So this is essentially saying this Asian range 68 pips. So it made a huge down move already. Okay, so what is the likelihood of this actually continuing to go down again during, let's say, London? You know, if we see how price is going back up again. And look, you see, you're not getting anything in particular. You see this? You see how now the 200 and the 50 is straight through price moving sideways. It's not pointing, up or down. It's literally just going straight sideways. Do you see that? So that's no good. Now, if you get this kind of behavior, then ideally we would want something to possibly happen during the US session. The problem is that it's not really an ideal setup, because we're not at the top of the range at all. We're like literally almost in the middle, and all we're doing is we're basically riding yesterday's low, but we're still looking for sell setups. You see how we're going into the New York session and we're basically pinning. You see how we're pinning this? Pin, 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 pin. That should give you a clue, guys, as to what they're doing. They're just collecting. See, why would price just hold up there? Do you see that? There's no reason for price to hold up there at all. You just had a crossover here. It's what, 9, what time is it? 10:15 in the morning. So unless you get some kind of a bigger move to happen, which you don't, look, you see that? It's just moving straight sideways, sideways. All right, so there is your move here. But it's way too late. I mean, granted, what would have been like 23 pips or something? It's really not worth the risk if the trade setup isn't clear. You understand? There's no way there's no reason to take that trade, essentially. So let's just go to Friday. So Friday could be one of those tricky days, right? Because Friday, basically, they could do something to basically set up the next week's cycle. So very important that if you're going to trade on Friday, all right, number one, it's got to be a really good setup. Okay, the setup has to be clear, has to be concise, and has to go with basically the cycle that you're in. So, for example, we're in a market maker cycle. We're looking for sells, right? So this should be a perfect, not even a perfect, but a good setup. A good setup for a sell. So either a type 2 or a type 1 setup for a sell. All right. So again, we just have to play out with what the range is telling us, what the Asian range does. The Asian range, let's play this out here. This Asian range is 14 pips. Okay. So 14 pip range. So unless we get something out here that's a type 1 setup, that's going to be the ideal setup for us. Okay. But let's see what price does. All right, so you see how price basically is moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, this behavior here with the 200 being on top tells you we're not gonna get a type 1 setup. Okay, we're more than likely gonna get a type 2 setup, and that's what we have to take. If you want to take this trade, it's gonna have to be a type 2 setup because of the behavior that we're getting. Okay, so being able to recognize this behavior, guys, is huge. It's huge. It plays a huge part. All right, so let's see. Yeah, you see how price is literally just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So the best thing to try to do is, if you're gonna get into any of this trade, is you might as well get up from the top, because that 200 is protecting you, right? So if you can get in a trade from the very top, okay, and see what happens, see if you get some kind of a trade going back down again. Yeah, so that previous candle there would have been a good entry. This previous candle here that moved up. And you can't be scared to take this stuff either, guys, because look, if you take this short, like literally, what are we talking about? We're talking about 6 pips. We're not talking about 15 pips. We're talking about 6 pips. Okay, so we're talking about very little pips, and you can take it to yesterday's low, and that would easily get you 38 pips. You see that? So we already know that this next candle dropped. All right, so it went down a total of like 63 pips. No matter what, 38 pips out of it, not a bad trade. Okay, not a bad trade. So essentially, you end up getting, on a market maker cycle for that week, 1, 2, 3, 4 trades. And so you understand the process that you're going through every day. You're basically determining, essentially, based on what the Asian range is. If it's huge, how did it move? That's huge to know how did this Asian range move. Okay, so like on Wednesday, you had this Asian range move very fast on a downtrend like this, right? So that basically very limited in you, essentially, what you could do during London or during New York. So adjust according to what's given to you. Friday is another example. You had a very small Asian range, right? Ideally, you would have liked the type 1, but you saw how price was behaving during the London session. It was just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and that 200 kept it there. So you knew you weren't going to get a type 1 setup. Okay, you knew you weren't going to get a type 1 setup, so there's no way to expect a type 1 setup. You'd have to expect a type 2 setup here, just because of the way that price is behaving. So understanding the behavior is huge. Understanding the behavior is huge. Okay, same thing here, guys. Look, if you get this Asian range and you're expecting a type 1 setup, or you want a type 1 setup, you actually got a type 1 setup, but it was it was during the US session. But the behavior here that you saw of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, essentially, is what would have led you to get into the trade, knowing the behavior that you're not going to get a type 1 setup here. The type 1 setup would have been here in the US session. Understanding you have a 37 pip range, and look what price is doing right here. Right, so knowing that it's still doing this, you know that you cannot get a type 2 setup from the bottom. Okay, you're looking for a type 3 setup potentially going to go higher. So it's all about understanding what it gives you during the Asian range and what to expect. Okay, just like here, same thing, 36 pip Asian range. You see how it's spiking, spiking, spiking. So you're pretty confident in the fact that you're not going to get some crazy up move, because if you were going to get a crazy up move, it would already happened. You would have already gotten that indication. Okay, so hugely important to understand the process that happens, basically, that market makers go through. Essentially, it's huge. It's huge to know and to understand, and really just to think like a market maker. That's it. Think like a market maker. It's going to play a huge part in how you do trading and how you trade. Hey guys, what's up? Just wanted to make a quick video. If you've ever thought about joining our mentoring program, this is the time to do it. For this week only, it's Black Friday week in the US, so we're going to go ahead and promote a 50% off for this week only off of the entire mentorship program. All right, this will never happen again. So this is the time. If you've always wanted to join the mentoring program, which is a lifetime membership, this would be the time. The links are in the video description, guys. I hope to see you in the mentoring program.